some standards to make them, I mean, in the real world. I mean, I know that this is very hard to actually make a process between like the qualities and what we can really do and implement in the spaces. And this is, and also do you think that it is related to the different cases, or we can have generalized standards in anywhere? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think the sort of principles that I presented in the second half of that talk are principles that you could apply, and you could apply those principles to most places. But I think we always must remember context. Clearly, I come from London, it's the city I know best. I reside in the UK, and what I say may not apply here or anywhere else. Equally, some of what I say may apply, and I think that's for you to determine to what extent lessons are transferable or not. Equally, whenever I do a visit like this, I probably take away much more than I ever give in lessons that I take home and apply there. So I think some things are transferable and some things aren't. Tomorrow, I'll talk much more about processes of governance. So how can we actually implement some ideas like this through our systems of urban governance?
More questions?
Thank you very much. It was really great. The question that comes to my mind is that how much of what you said needs to be applied by those who are governing the cities, like municipalities, and how much of that can be in some way gained by the citizens? What's the role of the citizens? Let's say let's imagine a city where those who govern the city may not be that much interested in that kind of looking at the city, and if their citizens were willing to have this, are there any examples in the history where the citizens could gain these rights?
Yes, I think potentially citizens have a really powerful and important role in how we design and manage public spaces. Sometimes in our case studies, that role was a negative one in the sense that citizens weren't properly engaged. And so, for example, one of the case studies we looked at was a place called Sloane Square. And in that particular place, there was a new public square that was proposed, but the citizens weren't properly consulted, and they didn't understand the proposals, and they campaigned hard against them because they feared that the proposals would have created problems in terms of traffic in their area. Now, I think in reality, the proposals probably wouldn't have caused those problems, but it was just the sheer failure to engage the citizens properly in the process that led to that outcome. I think by engaging citizens in a positive way, then they can help to shape places in a much more positive, in a much more positive way, and they have an important role.
But let's say if it's the other way around, means that there is no proposal for such spaces, and there are people who are willing to have these kinds of spaces.
Yeah.
Are there any examples where people have occupied a space and, let's say, turned a parking lot or a parking for motorbikes into a nice public space? There are.
One of the spaces that we looked at, and these are only examples, but one of the ones that we looked at was a space in a place called Woolwich, which is very close to where I live in London. And there a lovely space had been designed, but for some reason or another, it wasn't managed very well and deteriorated. And the local skateboarders decided that it was a perfect space for them. So they started to use the space and they started to occupy it. And over time, the municipality decided that actually the space would be much better used for skateboarding than had originally been envisaged. So there are good examples of citizens just sort of taking control of a space and turning its use completely around.
Thank you.
Hello, I've studied master in architecture and I have no idea about urban design, but recently I'm really interested in study PhD in Europe, even in Germany. And right now I'm writing a proposal which is consisted all you said in your book, in 2 books, Urban Reader and Urban Public Place. And I wanted to know from yourself that how can you please give me a good definition about segregation in social segregation or social integration. I want to know it with talking face to face and know it better to understand your workshop before you present it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can give you a definition just off the top of my head. I think urban design is centrally involved in ensuring that cities are for all citizens, and therefore fundamentally at the heart of good urban design is an attempt to create an inclusive city and to avoid segregation wherever possible. What we found in this particular piece of research was that segregation isn't nearly such a problem as some of the literature would have us believe. But that's in London. If you go to a city like Cairo, the situation is very, very different. And segregation, the carving off of parts of the city as wealthy enclaves, is almost the dominant mode of development. And I think if you have those sort of situations, then it's completely different. The concerns are of a different scale, a different order altogether. And long term would have, I would argue, very negative effects on the city as being a city for all. So I think these issues of exclusion and inclusivity are really critical for urban designers to engage with and to challenge wherever possible where we see those forces going against the need for a more inclusive city.
In your book, you said five or six dimensions. I've studied 2 of them. One of them is morphology of a space that talked about some alleys that we have them, blind alleys in Iran, even in Isfahan that make segregation in Isfahan. And also social integration. I'm really interested to know it better because we have this problem right now in Tehran and in Iran. I would really appreciate if you tell us more information about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
منم به نوبه خودم تشکر میکنم از استاد پروفسور. سوالی که حالا در مورد نمونه‌هایی که بررسی کردیم بیشتر از فضاهای مثبت در مورد آسایش، رفاه، نمیدونم حالا رفتارهای مثبت در مورد فضاهایی که اشاره کردیم گفتیم. آیا میشه گفت که همین فضاهایی که اشاره کردیم یا فضاهایی که طراحی میکنیم محدودیت ایجاد میکنه یا نقطه منفی خاصی داره یا کنترلی روی رفتار افراد یا ویژگی‌های اجتماعی افراد دارن؟
Or do they have negative impacts as well in our design spaces?
Yeah. Yes, lots of spaces like that. And in a way, in London and many cities, I think Tehran is a good example, for a long time we've designed cities and the spaces in cities for the car. And the car, if we design everything for the car, that puts limitations on citizens to use those spaces for other means. And there are lots of examples of that in London. Fortunately, I think we've turned the corner a few years ago, And we've put in place policies to try and reduce the amount of traffic in the city. And as a result of those policies, more public space is being reclaimed for people. And one of the key policies that was put in place to achieve that was what's called the congestion charge, where people are now charged to go into the centre of London, to drive into the centre of London. And that money is used to invest in public transport and in public space. And in a city like London or a city like Copenhagen, you see that has been used to real advantage to transform the quality of the city and transform people's experience of the city.
بله، نکته که شما میگین هست. در شهر لندن بسیاری از نقاط هست که مسئله داره، همونجوری که در تهران هم هست. شما فضاهای طراحی شده بسیاری میبینید که اینها هنوز مشکل دارن و مسئله دارن. اینجوری نیست که همه جا چیز باشه، مسئله به این خوبی باشه که گفته شد. ما در شهر لندن هنوز بحث ترافیک رو داریم به طور جدی، اما تلاش‌های زیادی شده از سالهای گذشته که ما اون رویکرد پیشین رو که بر اساس در تأمین دسترسی خودروها بود برگردونیم و واژگون کنیم و امروز اولویت بیشتری رو به بهره برداری پیاده ها بدیم. به این ترتیب فضاهای زیادی هم پدید اومده که ما تونستیم اینا رو بازیافت بکنیم، در واقع از فضای شهری تبدیل به فضاهای مطلوب بیشتری بکنیم و از اونها بهره برداری کنیم. یک عامل دیگری که در سالهای گذشته در لندن استفاده شده و در همینطور در شهر کوپنهاگ این است که ما اونجا مثل اینجا عوارض یا طرح ترافیک داریم که میفروشیم، یعنی پولی رو میگیریم و چی رو میگیریم برای اینکه کسانی وارد با خودروشون بخوان برن وارد مرکز شهر بشن و اون عوارض رو یا طرح ترافیک رو یا اون عواید حاصل از اون فروش مجوز ورود به طرح ترافیک رو ما صرف بهسازی فضاهای موجود و بهبود حمل و نقل عمومی میکنیم و همین خودش باعث شده که کیفیت بهره برداری از چنین فضاهایی در مجموعه شهری بهتر بشه. مخصوصا مرکز شهر امروز خلوت‌تر شده و قابل استفاده تر شده. بنابراین پاسخ شما این است که بله، این فضاهای با مشکل هنوز در سطح شهرها فراوانند، اما تلاش هم برای بهبود و بهسازی اونها در جریانه. خب شما بشین دیگه، این نفر تو یادداشت می‌خوای بکنی؟
In the transformation from one use or one type of space to another?
Yes, the process of people and government in coordinating public space in time.
Okay. Well, I think that's a very complex question. And tomorrow, if you're here tomorrow, I'll be addressing centrally the role of government in all of these issues to do with delivering a design agenda. All I say now is that role is fundamental. It's really important role that they have in ensuring a high quality city, including high quality public spaces. I won't say more about the processes now because I'm going to talk about them quite a bit tomorrow, if that's okay.
میپرسن که نقش مردم و حکومت در تعیین حالا این قوانین چی هستش و جوابی که استاد دادن این بودش که فردا حالا بحث نقش حکومت رو بیشتر راجبش بحث میکنیم، ولی این نقش یعنی حتما هستش و خیلی هم مهمه، یعنی حکومت نقش مهمی در تعیین این ضوابط داره، ولی این پروسه و فرایندش رو فردا بررسی میکنیم که چی هست.
Okay. I think we have no more time for questions, but I hope we can continue the discussion afternoon. Without any time missing, we will continue the part the third part, I think no more than 30 minutes. Thank you.